Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel, FPL Vincenzo here, and we've reached game week 10 of FPL. And today we're going to cover a topic that I've been looking at for a couple of weeks, debating whether to do it, how to do it, the best way to show an opinion on this. And it's just a general pod around midfielders. It's been on my radar for a couple of weeks because I've owned Brian Mbeumo for a couple of weeks, and there's been reasons why I've owned him since my wild card, expecting returns. He's got them in the last couple of weeks. I also own Reijnders, who's going the other way. He's being mass sold. No one seems to want him, and I need to make a decision on what I want to do with him. Do I want to keep him? Do I want to sell him? If I want to sell him, who do I want in his spot? And I think at the moment there's a little bit of sort of differing thought, and it's a bit up in the air in terms of who are the best midfielders to have. Is it the DEFCON guys? Is it those with high XG? Is it those that look good on the eye test? So I thought I'd try and combine all of that together into one pod today and see where we end up. So basically, I'm looking at all of the midfielders. Well, I've picked 14, I think, midfielders that I think are popular. I'm looking at them from an eye test perspective. I'm looking at them from a stats perspective. I'm going to look at them from a fixtures perspective, and then kind of come up with an overall ranking at the end in terms of what I think for the next block, what I think the optimal midfield is if you're on wildcard now, or if you've got a couple of transfers and you want to sort of fix your midfield, shall we say. So let's get into it, and we'll start with eye tests first. So just for the record, the midfielders that I'm going to focus on in this pod are Anthony Gordon, Cody Gakpo, Antoine Semenyo, Bruno Fernandes, Enzo Fernandez, Ebrice Eze, Reijnders, Brian Mbeumo, Ismail Sarr, Ilian Ndiaye, Yakuba Minter, Bukayo Saka, Mohamed Kudus, and Mo Salah. So I think those are generally quite attacking midfielders, quite adventurous midfielders we think have got upside, goals, assists, maybe in some cases some DEFCON. And so we're going to start looking at them here on the screen right now is sort of the average positions they've been taking up through the first 9 game weeks, just to see really if there's anything sort of untoward here, anything unexpected, any players that we think should be outperforming how they're currently operating because their positions are quite good. So I'll try my best for those on audio to show what to detail what's shown on the screen. But you'll see most of these midfielders actually play down the right most often. There are a couple of midfielders in this list who do have different roles for different systems, and maybe even in the same systems they have different roles. So Ndiaye is quite a good one. He's played off the right sometimes. He's played as a 10 sometimes. Minter's played off the right or off the left. Kudus has played off the right or as a 10. Bruno Fernandes sometimes as an 8, sometimes as a 10. Same for Enzo Fernandez. So it's not quite so straightforward to pigeonhole all of these players into sort of their expected roles. But this is generally how they've lined up and the positions they've taken up in the team. So what we're seeing here is, we'll start at the bottom here. So those playing down the right-hand side, you'll see Mo Salah, of all of these attacking players, has a really wide starting point. Maybe a slight difference to last year. I think Liverpool do have a natural left lean, should we call it. Gakpo's down that side. I think Isak or Ekatike, whoever's playing through the middle, tend to prefer to drift inside from the left. Florian Wirtz, his time in Germany, was naturally from a left starting point as well. So I think there has been a concern on Salah to kind of hold width. And in some ways been a bit isolated down the right because a lot of Liverpool's build-up has been down the left. So he's been asked to hold width. You'd like to think that he can attack the back post if all the build-up's down the left, and he can maybe get isolated 1v1 a little bit more because the play naturally spreads to the other side. But it hasn't really happened for him too much. So that might be a reason why his output hasn't met expectations and he's not justified his price tag so far, that he's just generally playing too wide. And also not overly high. He's not deep either. But I think if you look at last year, particularly when Liverpool played more on transition and had obviously Trent Alexander-Arnold in the team firing long balls left, right and centre, I think Salah was given a bit more freedom and a bit more license just to stay high, what we call cheap. Didn't really have to press very much, didn't really have to do too much defensive work. He was the main goal output of the team. He just retained a really high starting position and Liverpool looked to find him at every opportunity. I don't think Liverpool are using him in quite the same way this year. Maybe it's because there's no Trent in the team to play those sort of accurate long balls and release him quickly. Maybe it's the introduction of the other attackers into the lineup who maybe play a different brand of football to what Liverpool played last year. But Salah still looks a non-option to me based on positions because he's so high and wide. Other midfielders that maybe last year we saw high and wide are now playing a bit narrower. So Bukayo Saka has come inside a little bit more. One of the changes to Arsenal, I think, at the moment is more dynamic positioning. And because there's less pressure on him to be the creative force of the team, I think now he's given a bit more freedom to be involved in the output, where before everything went to him. Odegaard was obviously on that side as well. I do think Arsenal now with Eze in the team, maybe Zubimendi, a different type of profile of midfielder to Partey. I think Arsenal do build up in many different ways. Obviously, Calafiori and Timber alternating positions and things like that, turning up in different phases of the pitch. I think Saka now has the chance here to develop his game, where before he was very wide, often doubled up, tripled up on out wide. I think now he will be given license to play narrower. He will be given license to drift, maybe into more central roles, maybe make runs in behind. And we're already seeing signs of that from his average positions, that he's come narrower than what he was last year. Yakuba Minter doing the same, and Brian Mbeumo. I think these are an interesting pair because although they're midfielders, not the team centre forward, I think the centre forwards the teams do have are more linked players that more come towards the ball, try and drag the opposing defenders up the pitch. Welbeck does it, Sesko does it, even Cunha, if he's playing as a 9, might do it. His natural instinct is to come towards the ball, be a target man, build up play. When the centre forward is doing that, other players need to try to run into the space that's vacated in behind. If the strikers can drag the defenders up the pitch, there's more space in behind to run into. And Minte for Brighton, I think, has that expectation. And I think Brian Mbeumo has that expectation. I think, obviously, they're playing different systems. Man United playing their 3-4-2-1, Brighton more 4-3-3, 4-2-3-1, whichever you want to call it. So Minter, I think, still has more license to hold more width than Mbeumo. Where Mbeumo is clearly on the wing backs to provide the width for Man United. So he is very much allowed to play centrally, where Minter's maybe sort of in between being a central runner and a wide outlet. But both of those two very high. And in the whole grid here, those are the two highest in the table for average position. So if you're looking for midfielders that are playing most like strikers, I would say it's those two. Sarr is another one very similar. Obviously, it's quite a similar role to Mbeumo. Albeit Sarr's obviously a right footer playing in that right half space, where Mbeumo is a left footer in that half space. Something to bear in mind here, that lots of these players down the right-hand side are left-footed. Kudus, Salah, Saka, Minter, Mbeumo, all trying to come inside on their left foot to get their shots off. Sarr and Njai, the two down this side who are right-footed. And I would argue that makes them a little bit stronger because they're less predictable. And I think their shooting angles are more, there's more of them by shooting on their stronger side. So you could argue here that although Sarr's average position is a little bit deeper, maybe Palace don't have as much of the ball as Brighton and as Man United to control tempo, control games. So naturally his position is deeper. He's got the same role as the other two in terms of trying to run in behind Mateta. And he's probably gets himself in better shooting positions because he's right-footed on this right side. So he's a bit deeper, but I don't think that's a concern. I still think he's quite a good pickup here if his hamstrings can cope with the fixture overload. As we drift across into sort of more central areas here, Enzo and Eze, the most central of all. Eze, I think, he's kind of been a bit held back, actually, for Arsenal by playing as a 10. Obviously, it's been kind of forced upon them because Odegaard's injured. But I'd like to see him off the left, coming in onto his right foot, better passing angles, more likely to get more space, more touches of the ball out wide than what he is in that 10 role as well. I think he could add another dimension to his game and distribute the creativity well with Saka from opposite sides. Enzo, I think at the moment, had some really good data and really good noteworthy performances lately, probably playing more as a 10. But now we're getting Delat back. I know it's unavailable for game week 10, but now we're getting Delat back. Pedro Palmer might be back soon. I think he will sort of slip back into a number 8 role. That will push him a bit deeper. and then you're relying on him to make sort of old school Frank Lampard runs, to gate crash and gate crash the penalty box sort of late. So still a good own, I think, Enzo, with the fixtures for now, but just be aware that his position's quite deep here compared to most of the midfielders. The only two actually deeper than him are Reijnders, who they played as a number 6 last week, but has mainly played as an 8, and Bruno, who's obviously spending a lot of time as a number 8 at the moment, and worryingly is sort of near the halfway line in terms of his average position. So what's our expectations for returns from him from that deep position? Over on the left, just the 3 names: Anthony Gordon, the widest and the highest. And then just inside him, Gakpo, who's, I think, playing slightly narrower than last year, albeit slightly deeper than Salah still. But lots of opportunities to link play down that side and rotate dynamically with other options. Kirke's obviously over there, and the likes of Wirtz and Ekitike. And then Semenyo, change of wing for him. Arguably the most two-footed player on this list, I would say. And he's obviously doing very well. We started the season incredibly strongly down that left-hand side. So just some general thoughts I might have missed. So yeah, we've got Salah in the widest position of everyone on this chart, which has to be a concern. Mbeumo, high and central. So no real surprise that the returns have started to come from him. He's in really strong positions. Is Bruno too deep for regular returns? That's a debate to have with yourself and others. Yeah, Saka, I say, playing narrower than before, so opportunities there for routes to points with drifting in field and more runs in behind than we're used to seeing from him. Keep your eye on the likes of Njai, Minte and Kudus, who game to game you're not quite sure what position they're going to play in, whether it's going to be as a 10, left, right, etc. So that could have an impact. And then, yeah, noteworthy whether players are on the side of their stronger foot or on their weaker foot, because obviously we've seen in the past on the likes of Arjen Robben that even if you're very left-footed and you're playing on the right, you can still get lots of goals and assists. Stopping someone, even if they're predictable, is not necessarily always easy. But I think Ismail Assar probably stands out here as being on the side of his strong foot, which I think is quite helpful. So if you were to push me looking at this heat map, who are good owns, I think Mbeumo is clearly a good own. I think Sarr is a very good own here. I'd have one eye on Saka in this new role. Semenyo, Gakpo are both in quite good positions, I would say. And Enzo is probably reasonable if he can make those late runs into the box. Minte, another noteworthy one. I think he's the cheapest of all the players on this list, and his average position is the highest. It's just whether he has the data and whether he has the fixtures to cope. And we'll get on to those topics next. So next, we're going to look at the stats. Let me just change the camera so we can see all of it a little bit better. So if we look at the stats here on the screen right now is some colour coding. So I've got the same 14 midfielders looking at their FPL points so far and their price. And where the colour coding comes in is in terms of goal threat, what their non-penalty XG is, how many shots in the box they've had, and then more towards looking at assists as well from these players, how many chances they've created, and then non-penalty XGI. I've colour-coded all of those 4 metrics: attempts in box, chances created, non-penalty XG, non-penalty XGI. And what I've tried to do is give an overall colour to the player as well, based on all of those 4 metrics combined together. Best I can do. So green is the strongest in each category. Yellow is next. Orange is next after that. And red is obviously the worst. So the players are listed here in FPL points order. So Semenyo, there's 3 players in green here, actually, overall. So Semenyo, Mbeumo, and Gakpo are all in green. So Semenyo has had 18 attempts in the box, the same as Mbeumo. Non-penalty XG is round about 3. I think that's fairly good through 9 fixtures. If you're expected to score 3 goals in midfield, you're pacing towards 12, 13 goals a season, which I think is a good return from a midfielder. Little bit of assist threat in there as well, particularly from Mbeumo. He's probably the most rounded attacker here. Gakpo, very much the same. So in terms of, if you pair together attempts in box and chances created, Gakpo goes on to 34, the same as Mbeumo. Slightly more chances created, slightly fewer shots in the box. Non-penalty XG is about the same, and non-penalty XGI is about the same. So Gakpo, if Liverpool, well, they do soon come into quite good fixtures, the issue with him compared to Mbeumo is the minutes. But those two are pacing quite similarly. And for a combined cost of like 15.8 million, those two look fairly steady pickups. So Semenyo's still green as well. His bigger focus is on scoring the goals rather than the chances created, but that's obviously good for FPL. You get more points for goals scored, has a bigger impact on your baseline bonus and things like that. So he's one of those that is very much weighted towards goals more than assists. Plenty of others that tick that box. I think Eze right now for Arsenal is very much a goal scorer, surprisingly more than a creator. Pot shots from around the edge of the box, or maybe Arsenal have had in the past, maybe been guilty of walking it into the net. So someone that's prepared to shoot from the edge of the box is quite helpful. Around the box is quite helpful. Obviously scored from that position in the last round of the fixtures. So he's very much more goals heavy first. I think Ismail Assar is another one who is more goals than assists. Salah, fairly close. And then you've got the likes of Kudus and Bruno in particular, who are very much more assists first than goals. So just bear that in mind. Do you want assisters more than goal scorers? Some obviously more rounded. So where we end up is here, I'm not going to read the whole table out, but in green we have Semenyo, Mbeumo and Gakpo. All of them have at least 2 of the 4 metrics green. In the case of Mbeumo, 3 of the 4 metrics are green. Then in yellow, which is the next level down, we've got Enzo, Salah, Bruno Fernandes, Sarr and Minter. Their sort of general roundedness is mixed between sort of green, yellow, orange. Orange overall then is Kudus, Njai, Eze, Reijnders and Saka. And then just the only red here is Anthony Gordon. Just pick out a couple of sort of stats that caught me by surprise when I was putting this slide together. So we'll start for those at the bottom. So Anthony Gordon is only on 11 FPL points so far. He obviously did get a red card early in the season. But for a player that's quite advanced and quite pivotal, and probably get more pivotal now, Dan Burns playing more games at left back, you have to think that there's underperformance here. But he is the lowest on this list for non-penalty XGI. He is the lowest on this list for chances. Well, pretty much the lowest in this list for chances created. He's red for that. And he's also red for attempts in the box. So he's quite a hard pickup right now. There's nothing really in his data to suggest that the points will improve. He should be getting more than 11 points in 9 game weeks, don't get me wrong. But lots of red. So we need to see a change in system or a change in role for him if we're going to get more positivity and more output from him. Because it's not like he's got low points, low levels of returns, but his underlying data is good. It's not. So for those that own him, test of patience. Now, Newcastle's fixtures do get better soon. But he's way behind here on many metrics compared to a lot of this list. Saka's non-penalty XG is only 0.52 for the whole season. So if he isn't on penalties, he's obviously taken 1, but there's still confusion whether it be him or Gyökeres who takes them more permanently. If he's off them, it's a bit of a worry here that his goal threat's so low. He's actually comfortably the lowest here. I literally half of everyone else as a minimum. So a lot of the players here are near a 3 for non-penalty XG, and Saka's at 0.52. So when he's costing 10 million, that could feel like a waste based on current output. I think he's overpriced. I own him. So I'm not going to sell him for the next 2 weeks when they've got Sunderland and Burnley. But for those that have considered maybe the best solution for Arsenal being triple defence, I think the logical argument would be, well, if I'm going to own an attacker, I'd like Saka. I think his numbers will improve. And so I think he will get a slightly changed role, which could help him. Obviously scored in the League Cup in the midweek as well in a short cameo. So I still think he'll be reasonable. But there's certainly a valid argument here. There's 5 midfielders in this table that are stronger than him. And Arsenal defensively are so much better than everyone else. So I think it's a valid play right now on wildcards, go triple defence and not have Saka or Gyökeres in your team. Another one that stood out here was Njai. So just 6 attempts in the box. Now, he's owned because of how rounded he is. He's obviously gets more DEFCON than many attacking midfielders. He's on penalties. So not necessarily he's a bad pick, but really the higher XG chances and the bigger goal threat comes from getting into the box, taking touches in the box, shooting in the box. Just 6 all season from him. which is the lowest in this table. So I'm not saying he's necessarily a bad own, particularly at his price of 6.5 million. He's got lots of routes to points, but if he's not getting penalties, he doesn't have the goal threat of many others here. So again, it depends how you want to play the game, but if your sort of thought process and your desire right now is to have 4 sort of high upside, high ceiling midfielders, or even 5 high upside, high ceiling midfielders, I don't think he's in that list. I say if you want someone who's going to tick along, I think he's fine for that. He will pick up odd pieces of DEFCON. He will get occasional attacking returns. I think his minutes are secure. Everton aren't in Europe, all these sorts of things. But his upside is a lot lower, just so 1.59 non-penalty XG so far, which is in the lower section of this group. I say when you've got here Ismail Assar at 3.25, Enzo 3.09, Semenyo 2.97, numbers like this. Njai is pacing at like half that rate. Has created 13 chances though, which isn't bad, but he's steady without being spectacular. So yeah, there's some thoughts there. So the 3 that stand out based on stats are Semenyo, Mbeumo, and Gakpo at the moment. Just behind them, Enzo, Salah, Bruno, Sarr, and Minter creeping in. Then we'll move on to the fixtures. And I've chosen this time to colour code them in what I think is the best order. So a bit like the last slide, the colour coding was a bit subjective. Obviously, this is my subjective look at the fixtures in terms of looking at the XGC of the upcoming opponents, looking at whether they're playing home and away, and trying to rank the fixtures. So the only team I've got that I think have got green fixtures across the next 6 rounds of Premier League games is Brighton, who have 4 home games in that 6 with Leeds, Brentford, Aston Villa and West Ham, which is quite nice. Their away game is with Crystal Palace, who will play the midweek before in the Conference League against AZ Alkmaar, and then go straight into another round of games after. So it's interesting. It comes on the end of this run Palace are on, where they've already played last weekend, midweek League Cup against Arsenal. Then they'll play Brentford game week 10. Then they have another midweek against AZ. Then they play Brighton in the league. So that's 5 games of constant weekend, midweek. Will it start to take its toll by the time they reach Brighton in game week 11? Possibly. So that's maybe not the worst game still for Minter. And the other one, the away game, is away to Nottingham Forest. And they're obviously still a team to be monitoring and watching under new management. So I think Brighton have got the best of it over the next 6. They might not look at it immediately with Leeds, Crystal Palace, Brentford, but it's not bad after that. Forest, Villa, West Ham. 3 teams I've labelled as yellow according to the fixtures. So Man United with 2 what I would call green fixtures, 2 yellow and 2 orange. Liverpool 2 green, 2 yellow, an orange and a red. And then Newcastle 2 green, 2 yellow, an orange and a red as well. The thing to bear in mind is game week 11 is quite tricky for all of these teams. This is where a lot of the orange and red come in. So this is a look at the next 6 weeks of fixtures. But some of the better ones for these teams come sort of in a few weeks' time. So game week 12 onwards from Liverpool looks really strong with Forest, West Ham, Sunderland and Leeds. And also for Liverpool, quite noteworthy is that there's a midweek round of Champions League between game week 12 and game week 13. Lots of English teams have quite hard games that week. Liverpool have PSV. Obviously, the way they're playing right now, no fixture's easy, but it's a lot better than Crystal Palace having to go away to Strasbourg, Chelsea hosting Barcelona, Arsenal, hosting Bayern Munich, Tottenham playing away to PSG. So between game week 12 and game week 13, the Champions League games in terms of difficulty are hard. At least a lot of the teams are at home, which is obviously less travel. And those away are only going to France a lot of the times, with Palace going to Strasbourg and Tottenham going to PSG. But the fixtures are of a hard difficulty, which might make you think that teams will put strong 11s out in that midweek compared to the Champions League next round between game week 10 and game week 11. And Liverpool do have it hard and host Real Madrid right before travelling to Man City in the league. So it's not the optimal week to bring Liverpool players in. They host Aston Villa next, who obviously just beat Man City last week. Then they host Real Madrid in Europe and they've got Man City away to follow. So obviously Gakpo's come out quite well in a few stats so far, but it's probably a wait until game week 12 for him, when he can go into Forest at home, then I say PSV at home, into West Ham, Sunderland, Leeds. So I think that's a wait. everyone else in Europe this week is not too bad. Newcastle at home to Bilbao, Palace at home to AZ, Chelsea go away to Karabag. So that's, or Karabag, I should call them. Long travel though. Arsenal at Slavia Prague, again, not the closest. City have got a home game with Borussia Dortmund, and Tottenham also at home to Copenhagen. So it's not too bad this week, apart from Chelsea, who have a slightly longer European trip, and Arsenal, who go straight. It's 3 away games in succession for Arsenal. Burnley away in the league, off to Prague in midweek, and then back to the north again for Sunderland. It's not an ideal week. Where you look at Crystal Palace, and although their fixture congestion is quite a lot, their next 3 games this week are all at home. 2 league games with Brentford and Brighton, and AZ in between also at home. So the squad's getting stretched in terms of fitness, recovery and minutes, but at least there's no travel, which is something positive. Same for Man City. They've got Bournemouth and Liverpool next 2 home games in the league. Dortmund at home also in between. Tottenham also 3 home games this week. So just something to bear in mind. Arsenal have got 3 away games, where lots of the other teams have got 3 home games. Some are home, a combination of home and away. Liverpool, but the away games only going to Manchester City, so it's quite close. And the other team is Chelsea, who say got a long trip in Europe to Karabag and then back at home to Wolves. At least their away game this weekend is Tottenham, so it's London. 2 games in London followed by an overseas European game. So yeah, so it's Brighton in green, Man United, Liverpool, Newcastle in yellow. Into orange is Palace, who don't really have an orange or a red game, so I can see why their players are popular. I've listed 5 of their next 6 league games as yellow, so fairly good. And Burnley at home in game week 14, which is a midweek round. That's what the M stands for there. So something to bear in mind, that there's a lot of weeks coming up for Palace where they play midweek and weekend. I'm particularly worried about Sarr and Munoz with the amount of sprints and the amount of running they do. That obviously they're more at risk of hamstring injuries because of that's the sort of gameplay, shall we say, that's more likely to bring injuries, the more sprints and the sort of total distance you cover. So hesitant a little bit to bring Sarr and Munoz in because of that, but at least for now they're all at home. Chelsea probably have the best of it in the short term. 2 greens in the next 3 weeks, with Wolves and Burnley coming 11 and 12. Their immediate fixtures are probably the strongest if you want to play more short term than the next 6. Makes it particularly hard to sell Joel Pedro at the moment, and I have that conundrum right now because I say fixture wise he's got it quite good. Arsenal, a nice little run. No reds in their run, but a few oranges, a few tricky away games. Sunderland not giving much away. Chelsea obviously tricky North London derby, and Villa away as well. So nothing too draining on the horizon for Arsenal, but nothing. There's a few sort of banana skins in there. Man City, they're the hardest team I found to rank here. I've given them an orange, but they do have 4 of their next 6 at home. Bournemouth, Liverpool, who's obviously defence is all over the shop right now, Leeds and Sunderland. So I might have misranked them. You could argue that they could be ranked in the yellow category here. The only reason I didn't is because they didn't have a green fixture. So they've got reasonably good home games. Their away games with Leeds and Fulham, which again are pretty good. The next 6 is good, apart from maybe a trip to St James's Park, which comes right before they play Bayer Leverkusen in the Champions League, and sandwiched between that Leverkusen Champions League game and the Liverpool Champions League game. So it's not an ideal placement of fixture, even at Newcastle away game. But their fixtures are fairly strong. Obviously, right now, it's a bit tricky to pick anyone outside of Haaland because you're not sure about minutes. But they've got it better than most, and there's certainly a valid argument here they could be in yellow. In terms of red, again, another team that I find a bit hard to place was Bournemouth. They obviously got no Europe, so they get break between games. They've got Man City away now. They've got West Ham at home, which I've labelled as green. But then in amongst all of that, it's Villa away, Sunderland away, Everton at home, Chelsea at home. The very first pod I did on this channel was around Semenyo. You just play him against everyone because his returns are unpredictable and arguably in harder games suit him better because he gets more space. So I don't think it's a worry. You still just play him every week. But I've put them at red because I don't think there's much in the way of what you call easy fixtures for most of their players. If you've got Senesi trying to get Defcon and Mbeumo for attacking returns, I think most of these fixtures are fine. So very valid. They could have been orange here. Everton, I've also put red because it's quite a long wait to their 1 green fixture, game week 15 at home to Forest. Before then, I've given them 4 orange fixtures. Sunderland away will be tricky. Man United away will be tricky. Newcastle at home, I think, will be tricky. And Bournemouth away. So not ideal for Enjoy. I think it's not crazy hard. They've not got any of what you'd call the truly big teams. But I don't think they're particularly great fixtures for Everton as heck either. And then Tottenham at the bottom, who have to combine Europe with not the best league run, to be fair. Chelsea and Man United at home. Arsenal away, Newcastle away. They've got a PSG Champions League game in there as well. It's not the best run for Tottenham. It gets a bit better nearer the end when they run into Fulham at home, Brentford at home. But I think for Kudus owners, it's probably quite a good time to move off. There's better options than him. So this is sort of the final slide here, looking at overall. So I've tried to combine. Let me just have a look what it looks like on this screen. Can we see everyone? No, it's covered. So we'll jump back here. So you've seen the average positions of the players, and now I made a little table on the side as well, looking at the stats and the fixtures to see who comes out of it well. So Mbeumo, I think, for me, is the top midfielder in the game right now. His stats are very good. They're green. I think his fixtures are yellow in terms of difficulty and the fact they've got no Europe. His average position is high and central. I say it's been no surprise to me that he's got the returns he's got late. It's a shame I didn't do this pod 2 or 3 weeks ago when I first considered doing it. Excuse me. Because I say that the returns always look like they were coming. It would have been nice to do the pod before they arrive rather than after they've arrived, but that's the way the cookie crumbles, as they say. But I think if you don't own him now, I can see why he's popular. I don't think it's an overreaction to be bringing him in after the returns. There's a lot that looks good for him. Gakpo, I think, is very similar. Also got green for stats, yellow for fixtures. Obviously, a few more European games, well, certainly more European games than Mbeumo makes him more of a minutes risk. Also, his average position's a bit deeper and a little bit wider. But he does play for a team with more attacking threat. I think Liverpool, I find it quite hard to believe that in most games with their relatively best team out, they'll score, whether it's him or someone else. But I think they'll be the hardest team to stop from scoring, Liverpool, so that they'll generally be in the goals all the time. Just how many they concede to go with that. So I think he's also a good pickup. I'd be a bit hesitant about getting him now. I say that the next week isn't the best for them. But he's one I think I'd want around about game week 12 sort of time. So I'd have a plan maybe to get him in with Mbeumo. Obviously, Mbeumo further along the line will go to AFCON. So probably more of a reason to get him in quicker to get the maximum benefit before he leaves. Surprising third in this list is Minte, mainly because his fixtures are green. He's only, obviously, Brighton got, say, 4 home games in 6 and a really nice collection of games, no Europe. Stats-wise, he's pretty healthy in the yellow category. And he's my decision this week. I've got Reijnders. I think I want to sell him. It's just whether I roll for a couple of weeks to then make multiple transfers to get Reijnders up to somebody else like a Gakpo, or whether I just get Minte in for now and just get that done and view him as sort of my 4th mid and get Gakpo in from somebody else. I think I do want Gakpo. It's just the best way to accommodate him. But Minte ranks 3rd. Bruno Fernandes, 4th, yellow for stats and for fixtures. So it concerns me he's too deep, but his underlying data is still very good. Even non-penalty underlying data is still very good despite his deeper position. Whether he's worth the extra over most of these players on this list, I think is debatable, but I'm not ranking these based on price. I'm not taking price into it. I'm looking more purely at fixtures and stats. I could have had another position, another column for price and use that, but I didn't. So I think he's a solid hold if you have him. Tricky if you want. I think Mbeumo is better than him right now. There is an argument to own both. Spending 16, 17 million on 2 Man United midfielders seems a little bit crazy, but both look very healthy on this list. Same for Salah. Again, not doing enough, I don't think, with 2 yellows to justify 14 million. The wide average position obviously not helping, but underlying and the fixtures are still good. Then Semenyo, who I think fixtures are less important for him. They are red, but I don't think that really matters for him so much. Still green for stats. I think he's one to consider. We had this last year with Mbeumo, that there was a period quite early on in the season he became incredibly popular and his price probably rose about $1 million or something like that last year. And smart managers maybe found the time to move off him because the returns did start to slow down a little bit. the output dried up a little bit. But because we had so much money tied up in him and so much value tied up in him, obviously, if we sold him, he'd be really difficult to bring back. I think Semenyo's getting to that sort of position for this year. But for those that are a bit braver and for those that are willing to take a bit more of a risk, I think I'm not going to do it because I think the fixtures are still fine and I've got bigger problems in my squad than dealing with him. But I'm not outright convinced that he's one of the best 5 midfielders in the game right now. I think he's on the periphery. If you've got him, I don't think he's an urgent sell. But I also think his possibilities here, because of what he costs now, that he might not be the best in the shorter term for this upcoming run. So something to bear in mind. Star and Enzo next, both yellow for stats, orange for fixtures. I think Sar's particularly intriguing for this next block. I can see why he had a price rise yesterday. I wouldn't put people off. I think he's very strong if he can steer clear of injury because of this fixture congestion. So at least this week all the games are at home for them. Enzo, very role dependent, but I think because they've got 2 green fixtures in the next 3, Chelsea, I think he's a good picker. I think for right now, Mbeumo, I think is someone I would want. If I was on wildcard this week, I'd have Mbeumo, I would have Sar, and I would have Enzo. I think those 3 would be definite. I'd probably still keep Semenyo for the time being as the 4th. And the 5th one, I think you could take the punt on Minte. I think he is someone that you could maybe rotate with if you wanted to play 4 at the back or 3 up front. I think he ticks that box that he's a handy first sub, or you could start him most weeks. I think he's quite a handy 5th mid at the moment, particularly if you're someone who's fairly flexible. If you've got a decent 4th defender, but also someone you don't mind benching, if you're in a position where you've got Haaland plus a Voltamada or a Mateta up front, 3rd striker's a dead asset, or someone like a Krupi even, or a Gui, or a Foster or something. If your decision is to fluctuate between 3-5-2 or 4-4-2, I think Minte is really nice as a 5th mid in that sort of setup that you could rotate with that extra defender. Whoever that might be, like maybe it's a Sunderland defender or Rodon or someone like that now, and you can use that as your 11th man each week. That's probably what I would go for. Mbeumo, Minte, Semenyo, Sar, Enzo, with one eye on getting Gakpo. And maybe that's a Semenyo move in a couple of weeks that you take a chance and move him to Gakpo. Further down the list, with stats and fixtures, both oranges, the 2 Arsenal guys, Saka and Eze, and Reijnders, still for now has snuck into 2 oranges. Then Gordon's got red for stats and yellow for fixtures. They get better in a couple of weeks' time. And then orange for stats is Njai and Kudus, but those 2 I've put down as having red fixtures. So take away what you want from this pod. I just thought I'd try and do a bit of a breakdown, looking at sort of eye test and average positions, a separate section looking at stats and data, and a separate section looking at fixtures. Trying my best here to bring it all together at the end. Again, this is quite subjective. It's my interpretation of fixtures. It's my interpretation of data. Also a little bit my interpretation of positions. So there's an element of trust with what I'm saying here and sort of my takeaways from these players. But for me, I say that the purpose I started looking at this was because I've got Reijnders and I wanted to move him on. Was I overreacting to his bad performance? Was I getting sort of swept away with the current of everyone selling him, so I need to sell him, or was it that bad? I think it is, looking at 2 oranges here. So a decision for me whether I move him to Minte now or whether I sort of persevere for 1 or 2 weeks and then maybe I can get to Gakpo from him. At the point I'd downgrade Joel Pedro or something. So still undecided on that, but food for thought at least that there is Minte there at the price point that I think he could be a reasonable pickup. Also, I'd say the other big takeaway I think is the Saka one. I think he'll pick up, but clearly 2 oranges here doesn't make him worth 10 million. So for those on wildcard now are looking to make 3 or 4 transfers, I think there's enough weight here that triple Arsenal defence is probably the way forward. And pick 5 other midfielders. You don't need Saka. I don't think you need Gyökeres. We've looked at him on a previous striker sort of edition of the pod where Mateta and Voltamada and Thiago all were better. There's no one in the Arsenal attack right now standing out as someone that you really need to seriously consider. There's a couple of shortlistable options, but not seriously consider. Where defensively Arsenal are so much superior to everyone else, I think 3 defenders is the way forward for them. So that's it. And thanks for listening to this pod. Hopefully it helps a little bit with trying to work out where you want to take your own midfield right now, which midfielders you kind of think you want, and where you need to be heading for the next block. Just be aware, I say AFCON isn't that far away now. And I think it'll probably be my focus of my pod next week to start thinking about plans around that, because we need to get organised 5 or 6 weeks in advance around transfers and around players we need to move in and out, etc., etc. So hopefully I'll be able to get around to doing that next week. If not, it'll be the week after. Good luck in game week 10, and I'll see you all soon.